and even have time. I'm glad to know that some of you at least, even after Sunday mornings, you may re-listen to the message because I think it's important for it to get in your spirit. It's important for you to get in your spirit, and even to the degree where you rehearse it and you think about it again, listen about it again, and then you even have a chance to process it and see how it applies to you. Sometimes when you hear things a second time, you hear something that time you didn't hear the first time, or it kind of hit different the second time. And so it's important because we have to live by this word. We have to live by the words that God give us. And so we are in Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1. And I'm going to deal with verses 5 and probably 5 and 8. Not 5 through 8, but Daniel chapter 1, verse 5, and then drop down to verse 8. All right? It says, "And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king." Verse 8, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." I just want you to go, I'm going to read this, even verse 12. "Prove thy servants, I beseech thee then 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. And let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servant." And he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. The 4 Hebrew boys, really, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were challenged they even challenged their keeper, the ones who was assigned to set watch over them, that they would not eat the king's food, but to just give them vegetables and water and just see who turns out better, see who looks better. This is where we derive the concept of the Daniel fast from, right? Some of you all know that when first got sick and she went on a Daniel fast. She's been on a Daniel fast for about 14 years now. That's a long fast. She went on a Daniel fast 14 years ago and hasn't come off since. But it's the fast of 12 years. It's the fast of really no meat, and so that's where we get that concept from. And some may argue that that's not necessarily a fast, but the reality is it is a fast because it's a denial and a discipline and a abstaining from a particular food. It's turning your plate down in reverence to God, right? And that's the context of this. It's turning your plate down in order to reverence and revere the things of God. And so that's where that concept comes from. So now let's get into this. The Bible says the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. In the ancient Near East, sharing a king's table was more than just receiving nourishment. It was receiving, and I think we talked about this Sunday, identity, allegiance, and favor. Okay? And when conquered nations would bring captives into royal courts, they were often, as we already heard, given new names, given a new education, given a new language, and given a new diet. Given a new diet. That is, y'all know that eating is food is a huge part of what defines a culture. Right? Food defines a culture. Right? And so because of that, we know that even the food that we eat, it defines a culture and it gives a level of identity to who we are, right? And so, and the Babylonians understood something that modern even psychology now affirms and understands. And that is that if you repeatedly control what people consume, eventually you control how they think. If you control what people consume, you control it. And it's the repeated and continue and consistent exposure to it and the continual consummation of it that gives you that eventual control. The food from Nebuchadnezzar's table was not ordinary food. Okay, first of all, it was the best of the best, of course, because it's the king's, right? Best meat, choice meat, best wine, best everything. But the problem is that much of it, or most of it, had been first offered in ritual dedication to Babylonian deities or gods, such as Marduk and Nabu, I think was another one. And they would do that and then bring it to the palace, which is this is very interesting, and I don't want to ruffle feathers too much, but it's interesting because a lot of what, I'll just say it like this, a lot of what we do is not specific to our culture or our belief system. It's just about who we do it to. We're not the only ones that bless our food. We're not the only ones that pray, before we eat, dedicate our food before we eat. We do it because we know we're dedicating to our God. But it was a practice, a common practice that others that had other beliefs and other gods would do the same thing. And so this food was dedicated to these gods, right? But the problem is their belief was, of course, and these gods were not just other supreme, they weren't supreme. These gods weren't just other divine, pure deities. These were demonic, okay? And that's what made it the difference. These were, demons and of course false gods and gods that they believe were the source of sorcery and witchcraft and all those kinds of practices. So that was the real problem. So to eat it was not to merely eat dinner. It was participation in Babylon's religious system. Okay? So when you ate that, you were participating in Babylon's religious system. You were basically serving their God, right? You were allowing yourself to align yourself with their beliefs. So Daniel said, or he recognized, he said, this isn't just food, right? This is not just food that I'm eating. This is discipleship. This is indoctrination, right? This is fellowship. And what fellowship does light have with darkness, right? And so it was bigger than that. It was much bigger than just not eating the king's food. there was a heavy spiritual element to his denial and sustaining or abstaining from eating, the king's meat, right? And so, and it's interesting, if you notice, the enemy rarely begins his tactic of pulling you out, of lowering you, of whatever he's going to do. He rarely begins it by demanding worship, right? He don't just walk up to you and say, worship me at this point, right? There's always some lure, always some strategy, some type of, I don't know, some kind of, attraction that he uses to get you on the other side, and he does it gradually and consistently, right? He does it gradually and consistently. He begins first really by shaping your appetite. Because isn't this what happened in the Garden of Eden? Right? First, the way sin entered into mankind was through what? Our appetite. What we ate. Yep. So before Eve, and I use the word appetite because there's a difference between having an appetite and being hungry. And so before Eve reached for the fruit, he had already begun to deal with her appetite, right? If you read it, it wasn't just, Eve, you're hungry, eat this. It was, if you eat this, this is what's going to happen. So if you have an appetite for this, then if you eat this, this is what you'll get. If you have an appetite for power, if you do this, this is what you get. If you have an appetite for whatever it is, if you do this, this is what you'll get. And so he appeals to our appetites and say, now, if you do this, this appetite will be satisfied and fulfilled. So he uses not hunger per se, but he uses appetite, right? And if you just go down the line, right? Before Israel worshiped the golden calf, Egypt had already shaped their desires. Before Judas betrayed Jesus, his appetite, greed for money had already become his appetite, right? And sin is often the result of a corrupted craving, a corrupted appetite, right? The truth of the matter is some of us, we just have, well, all of us, because all have sinned, I can say that. And it's not all the same sin, but we all have or are the recipients, products of some level of a corrupt appetite, right? Just whatever it is. What do you have a taste for? Right? Because you ever, I'm sure you do this every day, probably several times, at least twice a day, when you consider the fact that you're hungry. You don't just stop there. You ask yourself and or others, okay, since I'm hungry, what do I have a taste for? Right? Because I can be hungry, but I still have to deal with my appetite. So I need to eat, but what am I going to eat? What is going to satisfy me, right? And so the devil understands that. And so he understands that if he can alter your appetite, he won't have to force your behavior. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. I need a microphone. There you go.
I'm thinking about halal meat, halal food. I see it a lot downtown. Every time I'm in the Uber, the Muslim person's like, oh, they have great fish. You should just taste amazing. And I'm like, looked up how it's prepared. I know they do it's a certain way they prepare it. And I was just reading, I think they just recite something like, maybe they bless it with their God or whatever. I was just looking to see. It's just how they prepare it. And I'm just looking whether I would, because I have a coworker, she's Muslim, and they always try to give me rotisserie chicken. I know they prepared us already, it's halal. So I wonder if it's something that we should, I know we can take everything with Thanksgiving and pray about it, but I believe I read a scripture about when it's dedicated to other gods, that we shouldn't partake in it. And I just wonder about that. But,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll answer that. I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to answer that a little later. But the short answer is when we get over into the New Testament under grace, right? Well, let me not say that. I think we do have to be careful and discerning and not eat certain things. Because it's not the food, it is where the food has been, what's been spoken over it, right? And then what you consume. And I think that is the real issue. It's not just the actual food, it's what it's been dedicated to. We'll get into it in Corinthians, but just want to kind of give you that short answer real quick. So eventually, your desires will lead you, hear this closely, eventually your desires will lead you where discipline once restrained you from. Hear me? Eventually, your desires will lead you, your appetite will lead you where discipline once restrained you from. And again, I can't stress enough the issue of repeated over time, right? Over time. Because again, it doesn't happen immediately, it doesn't happen overnight, but over time, your appetite is shaped, right? And so now, when we talk about this, and I'm not just talking about food, of course, but we're talking about appetite, restraint, discipline, the whole nine, whatever it is. I have a question for you. We start out with strong convictions, right? We all start out with strong convictions, strong lines that we draw, boundaries, the whole nine, right? Or we should, most of us do. But over time, sometimes that line or that boundary or that restriction seems to weaken, right? And so the question is, how do I keep my no strong? How do I keep my no as strong as I was the first time I said no? Or here's a better question, or another question. What weakens my no? Flesh. Okay. Desire. Forgetting. Pleasure. Flesh, desire, pleasure, forgetting. Yeah, all of those things help to weaken what was once a strong no, right? Those things help to weaken it. You ever made a decision, I'm not going to do something? And emotions, feelings, sometimes even love, right? Because sometimes, you say you're not going to do something for a person, right? I'm not going to do it. I know I shouldn't, and I know it's not good, and I know it's not healthy, so I'm not going to do it. But over time, the puppy dog eyes, the desperation of who you love, the repeated begging, the repeated I need it, the repeated whatever, tears, it plays with your heart over time. And so before you know, that strong no is getting weaker and weaker every day, right? Especially even like, parenting and, just, you know good and well they need to learn a lesson. They need to learn that lesson. And I know this is how they're going to learn that lesson. But the minute they just start crying and they start pulling on your heartstrings, lesson out the window. Right? And so how do I keep, so the flip side is, how do I keep my yes strong?
Remember your why.
Hmm?
For me, like with the food specifically, it was just remembering the why.
Okay, that's good. So that's a good point. The answer was remembering the why. That does keep your yes strong when you remember the why. When you remember why you're doing this, the importance or the consequences of what happens if you don't do this, right? Like when you realize that I got to keep my yes or my no strong because that's also keeping me alive, right? And oftentimes we play with life. Huh? We play with life. We play with our own lives, not even in the sense all the time of like physical death or life, but we play with things that are important, necessary to life and to living, right? And we think that a little bit won't hurt, right? And we think that this time won't hurt. And then that this time becomes another time, or a little bit becomes a little bit more, right? I eat, I can just take a spoonful, right? And I'll be okay. And then I take another spoonful, and I'll be okay. And as long as I'm not overdoing it, I'm all right. And then before you know it, that spoonful becomes a bowl. And, over time, you got to really have some resolve in you, right? So that your no stays strong and your yes stays strong. Sometimes you got to ask God and pray to God, God, help me to renew the strength of my no, the strength of my yes. Right? I want to be as strong with my convictions as the first day I got them. I don't know how. I don't know. And remember, this appetite, this eating issue, if you will, I'm speaking naturally and spiritually. This is the hardest thing to overcome. Right? Even the Bible talks about how the tongue, the mouth, if you can control that, you control the rest of your body. Why do you think the concept of fasting deals with food? Because if you can control that, then you can bring everything else under subjection. If I can deny myself food, I can deny myself everything else. That's why we fast, right? And when we feel ourselves getting weak, right, or leaning or compromising, we fast to renew that yes, to renew that no, to regain our strength in certain areas, right? So we fast, and it has a spiritual, psychological impact on us that, for whatever reason, through the process of it, we just end up strong again. Our resolve gets stronger again, right? That's why you should fast more than when the church calls for a fast. Everybody should have if you're really walking with God, there are times when God will just tell you it's random to you, but he will just tell you to fast personally. Just personally. You know what? Next week, I'm just going on a fast. I can't tell you how many times I fasted and never said anything to y'all. Like we do the group, the corporate fast, but there are other times, even if it's a day, right? Lord, you just wake up and the Lord say, don't eat nothing today until 6. I need you to come away in prayer, right? And the way God deals with me personally, it's not always food. And I don't know, some people say it's not a fast, but I call it a fast. Sometimes he will tell me, like, no TV, no social media, no talking. Limit your talking. Yeah, yeah. I'm getting ready to go on a fast again, right? Because I need God to deal with. I need God to fix something regarding my talking. So I'm going on a fast again because I know I need to regain strength. Trying to do it on your own, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work. You gotta bring God into this. You gotta invite God into this thing, into your walk with Him, right? So the enemy wants the enemy wants believers to become spiritually malnourished while being culturally overfed. Let me say that again. The enemy wants believers to become spiritually malnourished while being culturally overfed, which is why he puts things in our path and in our way to give us offers that will satisfy or fulfill a natural or a fleshly or a social need, but it will leave us empty spiritually, right? So what happens is, watch this, you get so full off of culture food, quote unquote. You get so full off of other stuff. You get so full off of whatever your appetite has called you and told you to indulge in, until now you have no room for spiritual food. So, like Sunday, well, I had room, but conceptually, at church on Sunday, we had ice cream. But after ice cream, I went out to dinner, right? Now, I could have gotten full off of ice cream, and then when it was time to sit down and eat what was nourishing and healthy, and there's no room for it. And it's the same way, in the spirit, in our walk with God, in the believers' system. We got too much other stuff that we consume, and that's why. And then when it's time to consume spiritual stuff, we don't have room for it. We reject it. We don't see the importance of it. We don't have an appetite for it. Because you've been filling your belly with other stuff. And now when it comes time for the nourishment of spiritual chicken and rice and potatoes and greens and broccoli, I ain't got no room for that. Because I've been eating ice cream. I've been eating candy. And so no matter how good it looks, no matter how good it tastes, we just don't have the room or the appetite for it. And that's a dangerous place to be, right? See, and it's about the order in which you eat, right? It goes back to what I said on Sunday. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, right? The kingdom is priority. Everything else is secondary. Seek ye first the kingdom of, what does the kingdom have to feed, what is the kingdom diet, right? And then all the other stuff, if I have room for it. I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with ice cream. I don't think there's everything in moderation. But there's nothing, is it? There's nothing wrong with ice cream. There's nothing wrong with cake. There's nothing wrong with cookies. It is. But do y'all get what I'm trying to say? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. It just can't be primary. Like, a cookie's not going to kill you. A cookie's not a sin. But it can become if you eat 12 cookies and no vegetables. if cookies are dinner, you know. So it's about the order and the priority, you know, extracurricular activities, sports, shopping, I don't know, whatever, riding bikes, whatever. Nothing wrong with it. But when that takes the place of Sunday morning worship, right? You see, the priority: seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all of these, and then all of his righteousness. Then all the when things start taking the place of it, right? So that's the issue here. Everything, you know, when it comes to the kingdom, the kingdom should be first in your thinking. Kingdom should be first in your decisions. Kingdom should be first in your behavior. The kingdom should be first in your priorities. The kingdom should be first in your money and in your appetite. And I'm not just talking about, when I say money, I don't mean giving only. When I say money, I mean even how you prioritize and budget your money, right? Because that really impacts kingdom living. Another lesson. But Jesus says later on, Matthew 5 and 6, he says, "Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness. For they," here's the last part that I like, "for they shall be filled." When you hunger and thirst after righteousness, you get full on righteousness first, right? Right? Because when you get full on that, you're too full for junk. You're too full for rest. You don't have room, right? Look at somebody and say, "I'm full. I'm too full for junk. Too full for mess. I have no room for mess," right? Notice he does not eliminate and demonize hunger. He just redirects it. It's okay to be hungry. Be hungry for the right stuff. Have an appetite for the right stuff. You know, the issue is not hunger, it's where you take your hunger. Hunger is not the problem, it's the appetite. Because your appetite determines how your hunger is fulfilled. Like I said, it's not the fact that I gotta eat, it's what I eat. And just like in the Garden of Eden, right? There are certain things you should have never tasted. There are certain things you should have never tasted, because once you tasted it, you developed an appetite for it. Y'all funny. Certain things, you know, like the devil. I mean, that fruit, right? He said, but he almost kind of told on it, said it. He said, once you eat this fruit, your eyes gonna be open. Or in other words, once you eat this, you're gonna develop an appetite for this. Your appetite's gonna change. And that's why it's so important that we keep certain doors closed. We don't indulge. You're not going to hell for your desires, right? Yield not to temptation, for yielding is sin, right? Every man is tempted, but then he's drawn away by his own lust or his own appetite, right? Everybody has a weakness, a temptation, or whatever it is, but be careful of even some doors you just got to stay shut, keep shut. Some thoughts have to stay in your mind only. Okay? You can't let them go any further than your thought. And even in that, make sure that you ain't thinking on those things too much, meditating, you know. Some things have to just stay where they are. Because once you bite that fruit, appetite, your appetite comes alive for it, right? You're automatically, it's just human nature. You develop an appetite for it. And it can be anything. Anything. You just develop an appetite for it. And now you're trying to figure out how to suppress your appetite. And the problem is, now that you've developed the appetite for this, nothing else satisfies you. So whenever you are hungry, that is what you gravitate towards eating. You don't have a desire for anything, for something healthy. You have a desire for that, right? And y'all can fill in blanks tonight, right? So there are certain things you want money. You know, certain things you shouldn't have never tasted, because once you tasted it, you developed an appetite for it. Right.
There it is. Okay. So you said appetite is when you taste it and you want it again. But before you taste it, was that more curiosity than appetite?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then when you taste it, then you have the appetite to want it again.
Yeah, your curiosity is what leads you to developing an appetite, right? Because remember, in the garden, God said, you can have all of these trees, every last one of these trees, except for one. Human nature says, I'm curious about the one. I'm interested. I don't know if I have an appetite for it, but there's something about the one that I can't have. That's something that's drawing me. So now I get to the thing I can't have, and now it starts being sold to me. Yeah, if the day you eat this, you're not going to die. Your eyes going to be open. You're going to be like you're going to be like God. See, now you're whetting my appetite. Now you're selling me on the benefits, right? And so now, if you just get me to take a bite, now I got an appetite for it. Just like that. Yeah. So it's what they call in psychology, this like habit formation and reward system. Because human beings, we naturally move towards whatever repeatedly rewards us, right? In Babylon, they offered immediate rewards. You eat this, you get prestige, you sit at the king's table. You little peasants from you little Jewish peasants, y'all are sitting at the king's table, right? You get recognition, you get comfort and, creature comfort. There's advancement. You get to move up in the world and luxury and acceptance, right? And then here we are, like I said, we're Zion's children trying to live in Babylon. Here we are with all of these offers that Babylon gives, but then God offers, God's offers are often delayed rewards, because he's not trying to gratify you instantly. He's trying to grow you and change you, right? So the enemy will offer you things that just make you feel good for the moment. God will put you in process, because he's like, I don't want you to feel good. Listen to this very closely. God's goal is not even for you to like him. He wants you to love him, but he don't really care if you like him. The scripture's full of people that protested and just, didn't agree with God. You don't have to like him, but he wants you to love him, right? And to love him you have to develop a discipline. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments, right? So to love him means I have to be a disciplined one, a disciple, right? And so when you deal with God and how he rewards us, the rewards are different. Babylon is quick, whatever. God is character. Let's build your character, right? Let's build your integrity. Let's build your spiritual maturity. And these things take time to develop. They don't happen overnight. They happen through process. They happen through mistakes. They happen through failures and victories. They happen through, all different kinds of processes that we go through. And none of it is instantly rewarding. That's not the way God does us, right? That's why he gives us grace and mercy while he's processing us. He gives us what we need to sustain while he's working that no in us and working that yes in us and, pulling down and establishing boundaries and setting. He's doing things to help us develop character, right? Integrity and holiness. And all of those things, they take time to develop. As a matter of fact, who in here wants to have good character? Show of hands. Who in here wants to live holy? Who in here wants to have impeccable integrity? Who in here wants spiritual maturity? Who in here has perfectly attained any of those things? And you ain't dead, then God's hand is still on your life. And he's still working on you. And he still loves you. And he's still processing you. Because he understands that the things that I'm trying to work in you, the things I'm trying to build in you, the diet I'm trying to establish in you, it's going to take time for you to develop a thirst for that, a hunger for that. You've been hungry for so many things for your whole life, right? And you still, even after being saved, you still have a hunger for certain, you still have an appetite for certain things. So he says, I will work in you both to will and to do of my good pleasure. He works it in us, not us. Colleen, microphone.
Everything that you're saying just kind of made me, and you've been saying it the whole time, like that development, just asking God and making it your prayer to ask God to develop your spiritual appetite. Because even like when we're eating like food, like usually if you eat something and it's not necessarily what you want, you're still hungry. You still want to eat until you actually get that thing that you've been craving or want. And I just feel like we need to do that when it comes to God's word, just asking him to develop that spiritual appetite where we continue to just crave it until we're fulfilled. Like, that's just an opinion of mine. That's all.
Yeah, I think the only, if I'm hearing you right, I think the only problem is you can't let the things of God substitute until you get what you want. You have to allow yourself to let this be the only thing you eat until you develop an appetite for this and lose the appetite for that. Most of us, we don't give ourselves a chance. We don't give the healthy a chance because we are too focused on not being, our hunger being satisfied, but we're focused on the pleasure of whatever food, whatever it is that we consume, right? So we don't give ourselves a chance to like Brussels sprouts. Mm-hmm. We don't give ourselves a chance to like liver. We just write it off. I ain't never eaten liver. I don't care how healthy it is. I don't care whatever. I just ain't eating liver. I ain't coming to Bible study. I don't care what they teach. I ain't coming. I'm not coming to prayer. I don't care how long. We don't even give the liver a chance. Mm-hmm. We just don't. I don't care how good it smells. It's just, I'm not eating liver. My wife, every now and then, she turns into that evangelist. It's like, why don't you just, go meatless? And I gotta be honest. I'm like, no, I just want chicken. I gotta have chicken. But the reality is, guess what? I don't have to have chicken. I don't have to. I'm looking at somebody who's lived very healthy for years without chicken. And this is the crazy part. I know that if I sniff food, I put on a pound or two. But it don't stop me. It does not stop me from eating chicken and ribs and potato salad and cabbage. I mean, you know. What's wrong with us? Because in the natural and in the spiritual, at some point you got to develop that self-control, that self-discipline. So yes, it tastes good. I can't eat it. I got to eat what is healthy. If I want to be a healthy individual, a healthy believer, a spiritually healthy, Christian, I got to change my diet. And that consuming is, let's go. It's so vast, right? Because it's not just about what I take in. It's another part of that is what I now refuse, right? So now I got to eat healthy. I got to eat prayer and eat the Word of God and eat fellowship and eat, all of those kinds of things. But I also now may have to refuse certain music. Right? I may have to refuse certain things I read. Because it's consumption. All of that is consumption. Your ear gate, your eye gate, all of those, the things you see, the things you allow your eyes to see. I got to stop that. Change your algorithm on your phone. It keeps popping up. I got to stop making that pop up. You know what I mean? Whatever, I don't know. But it's not just what I start taking in, it's what I stop taking in. I can't hear everything. I can't just listen. I can't listen to secular music up until the point I pull up to the church and then come into church and just try to worship. Bad diet. That's unhealthy. And then as soon as I don't even understand that. You leave out and then put it back on. Like, how do you do that? So this was just 2 hours of this is this compartmentalized? Like this just happens and then it didn't happen. How, you gotta be careful. We're believers, right? And so there's a certain level of discipline and guarding that we have to do. Not because we're going to hell, but because we want to be healthy. Wait a minute. Ray, then Randy. You got your mic? Okay.
I was thinking about that fasting part. Naturally they say when I had to do diets, they say do colon cleansers because that cleanses your palate. Because, going from one thing to the next, naturally you may say, I'm going to just start eating this, but you still crave the other stuff. But colon cleansers and colonics and stuff like that, the stuff. But just cleaning your palate. And I'll think about how fasting is kind of like that too, because fasting, you restrain from whatever, food, everything. And it can cleanse your palate, because you're, like you said, you're consuming the good stuff. You're restraining yourself from, you're focusing on what's right, the spiritual man. You're strengthening your spiritual man, and then you can gain an appetite for it because it can be really good, and really rewarding. And then you're like, whoa, that's amazing, And there's times where I would be constantly fasting, and it's like, man, why do I have to eat? Because it's really good, right? But then you go back to, eating, But I was thinking about cleansing the palate too, because sometimes you try and try. I guess that's like your own type, when you say doing it your own way, in your own strength, right? It's kind of hard, naturally too. But just, doing cleanses in your system to clean your palate kind of helps too. And I think fasting kind of is like that too.
Randy.
Since we talking about fasting and dieting, is it a way that we can balance it, to know what's healthy, because, I mean, I'm not giving up chicken either, but, you know, Keisha get on me all the time, because I peel the skin off everything. She's like, that's the best part, but I don't eat the skin. But that's just something I just don't do. But like, I'm like you, I can't give it up completely, but I don't eat it every day either, you know. Sometimes I get that craving for Popeyes, you know how that goes, and have that taste, and like, do I really need it? No, it's late, I don't really need it. And so, is it some way so my question is have we been taught properly when to eat, when to cut it off? Because a lot of stuff we eat late at night, we don't need it. You know, is there certain things that we got to watch a movie, we got to have something to eat with, you know, go grab something out the refrigerator. It's just normal, it's what we do. So maybe something a little healthier could, you know, but it just don't have the same effect. I'm struggling with that too.
I don't know that there's a workaround for that. I think, you know, I think there's a scripture that says, eat what is set before you and ask no questions. Right? And so as I take this and put it in the spiritual, I know your question's about natural stuff, right? But when I take it and put it in the spiritual realm, when we sit on Sunday mornings and we consume the word, right? We consume the word. Whatever I'm preaching, that's food, right? So how many of you spiritually remove the skin? Because I don't like that part. You know? I'm going to eat this, but I'm not going to eat that, because I don't like that. If indeed, this is a plate that God made and said, this is what I have said that you are to eat today. Do we have the right? Can we? Should we? Kind of start looking and going through our plate like, nah, not that. I don't want that. Oh, I like that. I'll eat that. I don't like that. Oh, blessings? Oh, yeah, I'll shout about that all day. Oh, he's talking about forgiveness. Oh, no. That's rutabagas. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's liver. The tithing, that's liver. I don't want that. You see? So now, there really is no, I don't know that there's any other way around it than just to do the right thing, right? So if you're watching a movie, it is easy, it is rewarding, it's better to eat ice cream and popcorn and all of that. But sometimes you just maybe have to get some, what is that, celery sticks, and dip them in cauliflower and dip them in some ranch dressing. And you see how somebody just said ill? You know, that's our response, but try it. Try it. Huh? If you dip them in ranch, you might as well eat the chip. Oh, okay, peanut butter. That's healthier. Peanut butter's healthier. Yeah, I mean, just continue the process. Just continue the process. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because honestly, like 15 years ago, if someone had told me, oh, you don't eat chicken boxes, I would have literally laughed out loud in your face. Seriously, because I love a chicken box, loved a chicken box. And french fries with all of the things that make it delicious. You know, but I think it's important as we are talking about appetite and what we consume, it is important to really seek God, because when you were talking about changing your palate and what you have a desire for, a lot of what God has to do is unroot some of the things that have been ingrained in us from birth, from childhood. You know, people been putting sugar in babies' bottles and things like that from the time they could consume. And so when you're talking about breaking generational cycles and breaking down strongholds in our thinking and how our relationship with food and money and things that we consume, it really does take for God to renew our minds. You know, even when I first stopped eating meat, I was a complete vegan. I didn't eat any meat products, no fish or anything. And then I found that that wasn't even healthy because I was consuming a lot of things that although they weren't meat, they were still doing harm to me. And so God really had to give me the blueprint as to what I was supposed to eat and how I was, and the things that I was supposed to consume. And so we have to really just ask God to reshape our thinking. My brother used to say, even when it comes to food, I don't live to eat, I eat to live. And some of us are living to eat, are living to consume our next meal, to buy our next purchase, and to all of those things. But we have to really change our mindset in order to be able to fix our appetite.
The king's strategy was gradual conditioning. You know, you just said something about from birth. The king, this was not a one-time offer, right? The king's strategy was, listen to this, give them my food for 3 years. For 3 years. He knew it was going to take some time to change their diet, to change their appetite. But I'm trying to get you to be, watch this, listen to this. I'm trying to get you to be a Zion child with a Babylonian appetite. Right? So it's not a one-time temptation. It's a systemic reprogramming. Like, because the enemy, he rarely destroys overnight, right? He changes their diet through one compromise at a time, one influence at a time, one relationship at a time, one conversation at a time, you know, one decision at a time, over 3 years. It's not. I would go into that, but sometimes, when you're talking about, abusers and even predatory behavior, one of the things that happens is what's called grooming. There's a grooming period, right, where before you ever, I guess, try it, you've been psychologically and emotionally grooming this person or a situation for you, right? And this is what Nebuchadnezzar was doing. He was grooming them, right? Just 3 years. 3 years of reward, 3 years of satisfaction, 3 years of, this good food. And before you know it, over that 3-year period, you will have lost your appetite for who you are. And you have gained the appetite for Babylon. Right? Because the goal of assimilation is not necessarily always to destroy. The goal is to make us indistinguishable from the culture around us, right? So Babylon wanted Jewish boys with a Babylonian mind, or God's people with worldly thinking. Hebrew faces with Babylonian values. Christian faces with Babylonian values. They're called evangelicals. It's like, I'm just kidding. That's not. He said, let me go here. He said, Daniel said, okay, that's what. I will not defile myself, right? Because the culture says, you eat from our table and you will belong. Because part of that process is when you eat from my table, there's a level of acceptance, right? there's a level of normalizing because of the pressure of having to stand by yourself and have a standard, right? And so now if I give in, then the pressure is off of me. And I can kind of blend in and don't have to maybe suffer and don't have to, go without. So the pressure says, eat from the table and you'll belong. Who wouldn't want to be eating at the king's table? Why would you deny yourself all of the benefits of eating the king's food, eating with the king, living in the royal palace? Why would you do that, right? And that's how the enemy gets us. Why would you not do this? Do you understand the benefits of compromise? But Daniel stood firm, and he said in verse 8, I will not defile myself. That's an important statement right there. Because notice, he said defile. Defile means to soil or to pollute or contaminate, right? So the question is, and y'all think about this, go, after I ask it. How do you defile yourself with something good? Daniel looks at the king's spread and says, I'm not going to contaminate myself with this good food. I'm not going to contaminate myself with that halal fish. Right? See, how do you defile yourself? See, it's not about where it's going. It's about where it's been. And that is the issue of defilement. I don't know if I have time to do this tonight. 1 Corinthians 6, I'm gonna read it, and then let's do this. We're talking about defiling ourselves, right? Through consumption. 1 Corinthians 6. Let me show you something. 1 Corinthians 6 and 15 simply says, know ye not that your bodies are the members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them the members of a harlot? God forbid. What? Know ye not that he which is joined to a harlot is one body? For two, he saith he, shall be one flesh. Okay? Now, when you sleep with a harlot, prostitute, unprincipled individual, the scriptures, the definition is a whore or scoundrel. Believe it or not, harlot, the word harlot was not originally associated with a female. It was with a male, a vagabond, a bum, right? That's what a harlot was. So now a harlot can be male or female, right? And so he says, when you sleep with a harlot, right, don't you understand consumption? Don't you understand how you're defiling yourself? Because think about it. When you sleep with a harlot, by definition of a harlot, prostitute, when you sleep with a harlot, you are not just sleeping with her or him. You're sleeping with who they slept with, and who they slept with, and who they slept with, and who they slept with. And so now you have a whole network, right? That, as the scripture says, you become one body with, one flesh with. That's why, I would do a demonstration, but it's like I said, in terms of defilement, it's not about where she's going or where he's going, it's about where he's been. Right? about where they've been. And so now when you bring that into your life, you're bringing every person, everything, everywhere they've been, you're bringing that into you, into your body. That's why it's a sexually transmitted disease. I think they use infection now or something, STI, STD, whatever. Whatever they had, you have, because you became one flesh. I would almost venture to say that that's a spiritual principle. I would almost venture to say that, right? And if it's a spiritual principle, then it gets even scarier. It gets even scarier. You know how you get married and you're at your wedding party, and your wedding, right? And you have the bride and the groom. And let's say you have 6 bridesmaids and 6 groomsmen, right? Beautiful wedding, all your colors, and you stand there and you say, "I do." Right? But let's look at the wedding party a little different. These aren't the people that are standing beside you. Maybe they're not your friends and your well-wishers, your supporters, and those who are standing in agreement that this is what should happen. That's what the real wedding party is, right? But look at it maybe differently. When you say "I do," I'm saying I do to the person I'm marrying, and those people behind her or him represent everybody they've been with. So I'm saying I do to you, and 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 to you. If we becoming one, and you've been one with them, and one with that person, and one with that person, then you're bringing all of that to the "I do." So maybe you're saying "I do" to one person, but you're saying "I do" to 100 people. And then there's some things that you may even, you got to be real, I won't go into that, but you got to be real careful, because there's some things that you may not even realize or recognize have been transmitted. Right? How? Through consumption. You're wondering why you thinking a certain way and feeling a certain way and act a certain way and behave a certain way, and you don't know where this comes from. It could be somewhere down in the line. It's somewhere down the line, right? And that you became one with. When you said, even if you don't say "I do," if you say yes, one night stand, it's still somewhere down the line, somewhere in there, right? And so Daniel said, "Listen, I'd rather be rejected by Babylon than be disconnected from God," and that has to be the resolve. So look at what he says. He says, "Give me pulse and water. Give me vegetables and water." Wow, what a stand. What a stand for less than. What a stand for self-denial, right? And refusing to compromise. I'd rather eat vegetables and water than lobster, steak, shrimp, whatever. What's your favorite meal? What's your favorite? Whatever. I'd rather just have vegetables and water. So is that our spiritual stance? Right? I'd rather eat what God grows than what idols receive. What a powerful principle. I'd rather get it from the mud than get it from compromise, right? I'd rather have less money and more integrity. See, that's the kind of, I'd rather have less and have more, right? I'd rather have fewer opportunities and more anointing, right? I'd rather eat from God's field than the devil's banquet. Because everything that glitters is not blessed and it is not gold. And let's be clear. Now, we're taking it to the New Testament and I'm finished. 1 Corinthians 10:21, it says very clearly, listen to this, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. And that has natural and spiritual implication. First of all, who knew there was still a devil's table? A devil's cup. Cup of demons. Table of devils. Right? Right? Some tables are prepared by kings and prepared by God. Some tables are prepared by demons. Question is, whose table are you eating from? Daniel said, I'm not going to defile myself. I'd rather go without than to eat at the table of devils, table of demons. This is a challenging lesson because you know why? It raises the bar so high. It raises the bar so high because it says it's not. It has a tone of insensitivity to struggle and weakness. Because you know that's what we use and we throw back all the time. I'm struggling with this. It's my weakness. God's got to help me. And at some point, Daniel says, I don't know if it was easy or not, but he did say, just give me vegetables and water. I'll go without. I'll hold myself at night. But this one night stand, this in and out my house, I'll be a janitor. But all of this compromising for $1, another $1, I can't do it. I just can't do that. You know, like those are the kind of stands you have to take in this hour if you're really going to live for God. Nobody said it would be easy. Nobody said it would be easy, but it's worth it. But it's worth it. Because of the end. Because the end, what was the end? What was the end, y'all? Anybody want to tell me? Don't look in your Bible. What was the end? Yeah. What did it say? He said, look at this. The king is going to feed me 3 years of good food, but just give me 10 days. And in 10 days, he came out looking 10 times better. 10 times better. Fatter, healthier, you know, all of that. So it's worth it all. Because in the end, you come out better. You just come out better. Life is just better. Right? Whose table are you eating from? Questions, comments, observation? Randy?
What we teaching on is this Old Testament?
What?
We started teaching tonight.
I mean, kind of. I mean, the setting, the narrative is Daniel.
Okay.
Prophetic.
I'm asking that because I forget which, I know it's in Matthew somewhere, but Jesus talking about it's not what goes into a man defile a man, but what comes out to defile a man. So is this something different what Daniel was talking about, reference to this. Okay, that's what I
It's
wanted.
different. Yeah, I looked
Okay.
it up earlier. Funny, I was like, I'm gonna get that question. It's different. and I did the research. It's different.
Okay.
It's not addressing the same thing.
Okay.
Because food is not the issue. It's consumption.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were talking. Jesus was talking specifically about washing hands
Okay.
and food,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So
I think
he was talking
when
about
it
a
comes
ritual.
out, yeah, it comes out, I think you're talking about fornication, all that stuff, what comes out.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's all I had.
No, it's a good question. Good question. Somebody else had their hand up? Question? Okay, very good. Oh, go ahead, Colin.
When you were saying that sometimes it's what we consume, like as far as visual and the things that we just consume in that way, I had a conversation with someone and they were saying even what we say, right, like the word welcome, using the word welcome, like when you greet someone or see someone or when they say thank you and you're saying you're welcome, or when you, like sometimes you have to be careful with using, and I'm just asking, is that, or should that be a thought process, saying you're welcome to people, because sometimes you're welcoming the wrong spirit or you're welcoming the wrong thing, like, is that a thing?
I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of being polite. I don't know, but I have heard people say that they won't even put like welcome mats at their door, because if you do that, you're just welcoming anything in or whatever. I've heard that. I don't know how I feel about that, but I have heard it. I just have to do more research. Yeah, I don't want to make light of stuff, and I don't want to make too much out of it, right? And you got to know what is, superstition, and what's real. So I don't know. I gotta think about that. Pray about that. Just my honest answer. Some people don't put welcome mats, on the front door, like that rug or whatever. Some people don't put them at their house because they say they're welcoming in spirits or welcoming in whatever. So they don't put it at the door, put that at the door. What do y'all say?
Well, I mean, you have to rebuke things, even in the sanctuary, we have a welcoming spirit. But come in here in that certain way, you welcomed out.
Right, absolutely.
So I think that it goes in the home too, like, respect.
Absolutely.
Respect my house.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you can't have that spirit up in here. Like you said, I think you said there's a spirit that was in your house at one time. And said that in testimony, you opened the door and got to go.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Just one clarity. So the scripture talk about receiving things with thanksgiving, right? And I think it went along with, not to be offensive to people. Let your freedom be offensive, and take it with thanksgiving versus not eating things that are sacrificed to God. Can you still take it in with thanksgiving if it's halal, for example, if that's the case? I just want to understand it, because I just thought about it's good. It's prepared a certain way. It's not the pesticide stuff that's in the market so much. They get this stuff like kosher, right? They specifically prepare their food a certain way. It's so fresh. It's so good. But like you said, the appetite portion, you're not taking part. That's not my God. So when I take it, I don't know where the other food been. It's not, dedicated. It might even be prepared right. But I just wanted to get clarity on that, because I was just thinking about that. And, it might not be a big deal but just thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that the whole receiving things with Thanksgiving just has to do with, first of all, the context is, it's literally about dietary restrictions that people eat, right? Like, remember when God told Peter, rise, slay, and eat? And he said no. And then God said, what I call clean, don't you call unclean, right? So that was a shift in the dietary restrictions. So what Paul is addressing is people who still held fast to that. And so he was saying, if you have to understand that since there's now nothing unclean, receive it with thanksgiving and just eat it. That's all. But Paul is addressing something different in 1 Corinthians 10. Receiving food that you just think is unclean or you think is like shouldn't be eaten by something, you shouldn't eat it. That's one thing. But there's another thing when the food has already been dedicated, consecrated, sanctified to something, right? That's when you draw the line. So I am, now that you said that, I do think we have to rethink like halal food, if there's some type of ritual or whatever spoken over it. Yeah, I think we have to rethink that. I think you do. What's that? Oh. Even though it's good, king's meat is good, but if it's sacrificed, if it's dedicated, then it's not for our consumption. All right, good class, everybody. Good class, good class. Let's prepare our hearts now to give, and let's give, and let's be mindful. What is this Sunday? Father's Day. Yeah. Father's Day. That's right. That's right, Eric. We get celebrated as Father's Day. And so let's all show up. Huh? Let's see, right? Get ready for your socks and your ties. The big piece of chicken. Not dedicated to idols. Father's Day. All right, everybody, let's give. Let's stand tonight and give. I know even if you're giving electronically, let's give. Oh my gosh. Oops. Did I just?
I lean, leaning on the Lord's side. Tell me whose side are you leaning on?
Leaning on the Lord's side.
Tell me whose side are you leaning on?
Leaning on the Lord's side.
I lean,
Leaning on the Lord's side.
I
Lean, leaning on the Lord's side.
Tell me whose side are you leaning on?
Leaning on the Lord's side.
Tell me who